In May 2025, the European Gymnastics Championships took place in Leipzig, Germany. A week before the event, I was asked to be part of the BBC broadcasting team that was going to cover the European Championships. I thoroughly enjoyed having the opportunity to sit down and watch the Apparatus finals live and then catch up with the earlier events that took place in the week. The British men have already been back in action, competing at the British Team Championships, and this is my story. So the European Championships were an amazing event. It was really exciting to be asked to be part of the broadcasting team. That's the second time this year. It really does show what are we 120 episodes in. I think I had a personal long-term goal of, being part of an Olympic Games in terms of broadcasting or commentary and whatever that might look like in 4 years' time. So to have been asked so early in the Olympic cycle is brilliant. It's something that I'm proud of. I think it's reflective of the work and the consistency that we've kept up. And it's a good reminder of that as well for me, probably in the future, that, good things take time and you have to be consistent and you've got to earn that credibility. I think the other thing as well is that it's always, for me, because it is somewhat related to British gymnastics and there's always like the hesitancy, and Sam normally gets that from me. I'm normally asking Sam as a sound boy, do you think this is the right thing to do? And, in that situation, I think for me it was, I've been very vocal about wanting to be in control of my narrative and pushing the sport in a positive direction forwards. And again, I think it just comes back to that. I think if your intentions are good and it's to have a positive influence and try and move the sport on and improve things, even if you go into a situation where other people maybe have ulterior motives, as long as you stay true to who you are, that's the most important thing. And I think, I really enjoyed the environment that I was in. I guess the process of that was that a week before I received an email. I've spoke on this podcast before about every January sending out emails to the contacts that I still have within media. And when I say contacts, these are people that maybe I did an interview with 4 or 5 years ago while I was still competing. Didn't get anything back this year from the BBC, but then was put in contact with them ahead of the British Championships, with that event being on the BBC iPlayer. And then again, from what I understand, the team at British Gymnastics, the media team specifically, they put my name forward to the BBC ahead of the European Championships. And a week before they asked me, we'd booked a last-minute family holiday out to France, so that really confused things logistically. And my initial reaction was that I didn't want to do it, actually, because I was so tired. I just wanted a break, and the idea of cutting that holiday short was stressing me out a little bit. But to her credit, it was Connie that really pushed me to take the opportunity. And as I got there, and you get to Media House in Salford in Manchester, and you're in that building and there's thousands of people that work in that building, I appreciated how big that opportunity was and that it was something to be grateful for, and an opportunity for me, I guess, to share my gymnastics knowledge and try and really bring that slant to it, specifically in terms of the men's artistic and those apparatus. I don't for a second pretend to be an expert in women's gymnastics, but in terms of men's gymnastics, this is what we do on the podcast. We do this every single week, and we've done that for 120 weeks now, and it feels like I'm really able to put those years of watching VHS tapes into practice, which was probably evident with some of the things that I brought up in the broadcast. I think the last thing I said before we kind of cut off was, that coach was in the 1996 Olympic floor final for France, and I realised how geeky that was as I said it. But no, it was really nice to sit there in quite a quiet room, actually. So between the action of being in the studio with Matt Baker and Beth Tweddle, who, by the way, were incredibly welcoming and certainly made me feel at ease, between those little interactions that we had after the apparatus had finished and it went back to the commentary room, Matt Baker would go back to the commentary room and me and Beth would just sit and watch the gymnastics. And it was really cool because there was a live feed on one TV, so that was live from the arena, and then it was what the viewers were seeing at home, and there was maybe a 2-minute lag on that. So there were some moments where you could kind of watch particularly on the second day of Apparatus finals, when it was the vault final, you could kind of watch both vaults at the same time. And I shared that reel on my Instagram because I thought it was so cool to watch Jake's incredible vault and also his second vault. And they were kind of, one was being played in slow-mo, the other one was in real time. And it was just really cool. It was a really good experience to sit in a quiet room, no distractions, no Aussie kind of running around, get me to play games with him and all of that, and just watch some gymnastics. I really enjoyed that. It was great. And it gave me a really good perspective. I think it's really hard now for everyone, because we're so connected to our phones, to just do one thing at a time. So I often find myself watching a film or a TV show and then scrolling on my phone. It's really hard just to do one thing. So to sit in that quiet room and my job just be to watch the gymnastics and then talk about it, I really, really enjoyed that. It certainly reminded me of those times sat in front of the VHS player just watching gymnastics competitions and almost studying them and analysing them. I don't think I've done a lot of gymnastics analysing for a long time since I've been retired, because I've kind of watched it for fun and dipped in and out, but to watch it, to then talk about it, that was really cool. I enjoyed that. Reminded me of some of the podcast episodes we've done, maybe with Kensley, where we're reviewing some of the competitions that have happened. So it was a great experience. Thank you to the team there for making me feel very welcome. I wasn't sure what environment I'd be going into. A lot of my friends, teammates, and me as well, have been critical in the past of them not having, as part of the broadcast team, let's say an expert from men's gymnastics who's competing or has just retired, and vice versa for the women. So they might have a man talking about the women's events or a woman talking about the men's, and they're just completely different sports. I wouldn't for a second expect to be an expert on A-bars because I swing around the high bar and vice versa. So it's really great that they did that. I enjoyed the experience. They were very welcoming, and I would certainly do it again. And I think my expectations of the event going into it in terms of the actual gymnastics, we did a preview episode with Kensley, which was brilliant. I think the one thing that came out of that Kensley picks up on is that we talked about Milad Karimi, and I always get confused with which Stan countries are in Europe and which ones are in Asia, and that Eastern Bloc over there that is very close to Asia and Europe. Some of those countries are in Europe, like Armenia, and some of those countries are in Asia, like Kazakhstan, and we got that wrong there. So Milad Karimi has been competing in the past weekend at the Asian Championships. I was expecting him to do really well, but that was my lacking expertise in geography there from primary school. My expectations going into the event was that the defending champions would do a good job of defending their titles. I think Team Ukraine had won the Europeans last year, but I expected them to be a lot weaker. I think a lot of disruption to their team. Two of their gymnasts now, I've learned, Ilya Kovtun and the young gymnast, who I was really impressed with last year at the European Championships, have moved countries, are going to switch nationalities. So complete disruption in that team. The national coach, Star Skinsky, wasn't allowed to be at the competition. He'd fell out with the federation. So lots of politics, and obviously in that part of the world, lots of geopolitics going on. So completely disrupted. And as I expected, they didn't perform the way they did 12 months ago. I think they're very much in a rebuilding phase. It seems like Oleg Vanayev is right at the end of his career now. It's going to be a changing of the guard, and I feel it almost feels like the 90s when a lot of those Ukrainians have spread out and they kind of leave and there's a bit of an exodus. I feel like that's going to happen again. That happened post-2012 with that very good Ukrainian team that finished fourth just behind Great Britain at the Olympic Games. A lot of those guys left, and then there was a rebuilding phase. So we'll see. I think changing of the guard for Team Ukraine, but the British men, they didn't surprise. They did very, very well in qualification, won quite comfortably. Very, very professional performance, I'd say. It's been really interesting to see how our strengths as a nation have shifted somewhat. It's now very much floor, vault and rings. We've been very good on floor in the past in terms of just technical gymnastics. I think the difficulty on floor now is the thing that stands out. Big gap between us and the rest of Europe. You've got 3 gymnasts competing a 6-1 floor routine, which is just absolutely wild. And I think that was evident when it then came to later on in the competition in the week and the floor finals. Rings, again, you've got 2 gymnasts that can compete in a rings final, and you've got other gymnasts that are pretty strong too. So Jamie, who was part of that team for the first time at major championships, pretty strong gymnast, so a good third score on rings. And you also have Luke, who's pretty strong. So, yeah, rings very, very strong for Great Britain. And I would say that probably was our weakest event over that period of time where we had those strong pommel horse workers. And then vault again, just those two guys, Harry and Jake, two of the best vaulters in the world. And you know, heading into LA, I don't see that changing. I think they're going to be right up there, and I think they're going to be fighting each other in terms of difficulty. So it's going to be interesting. I think it's almost like a race to see who can have 256 vaults, and they're both training them. So it'll be really interesting to see who puts their flag down in the sand first and gets those 256 vaults moving forwards. And then when it comes to the other apparatus, so the more technical apparatus, so pommel horse, parallel bars, and high bar, I think we still have some weak spots. I think we actually look quite strong still on pommel horse. We maybe don't have that outlier in terms of scores within the guys that are likely to compete in the team, but I think those lower scores, the average has been pulled up, and those guys are pretty consistent. So between a 13.5 and a 14, which is really good, and it's going to be about those guys that are in the team, how much can they improve their pommel horse potential, rather than maybe someone that's a pommel horse specialist coming in. If you are going to come into that team as a pommel horse specialist, you're going to have to be very strong all around as well. And at the moment, we do have 2 or 3 athletes that are strong on pommel horse and have good all rounds, but they're not as good as the top guys. So pommel horse is an area where I think the guys that are in the team are going to be focusing on improving their scores and their difficulty. And then when it comes to parallel bars, again, not too bad, pretty solid. I think Courtney was a real surprise. He wasn't a member of that team there, but qualified for the parallel bars final. And I think after that competition, he's going to be looking at that going, okay, well, there's another apparatus that I can offer in terms of a team setup. So it's not just rings and vault. I can also offer parallel bars and floor. I think the difficulty that we have is that Courtney and Harry are very similar gymnasts, and at the moment Harry probably edges that in terms of his ability to medal on floor. You know, he's won an Olympic medal on vault last year, and within 12 months won a European medal on floor and was 5th on rings. So it's going to be very, very hard for me if Harry stays fit and healthy over the next couple of years at least, for anybody to be taking that spot, that type of gymnast spot. I think he's going to more than likely be the kind of specialist on that team. And then when it comes to high bar, still a little bit weak. I think everybody is probably a little bit weak, but in comparison to the other nations, we're still a little bit weak there. So there's definitely room for improvement. I think the exciting thing is that we have some junior gymnasts that are starting to make that transition that are technically very, very good on the high bar, and it seems like their appetite for doing big skills is super high. So, you know, I'm already seeing, I think the other day I saw a 13-year-old from South Essex catch a Cassina, which I remember trying to catch a Kovac for the first time before my birthday when I was like 14 maybe. I was trying to catch it before my 15th birthday and I never did it. So you fast forward 15 years and you have a young gymnast catching a Cassina at 13 years. Just sounds crazy. So yeah, incredible where the sport's come, how far it's come, and particularly on a high bar. I think that is a place where these juniors coming up, they can look at that and go, okay, pommel horse, P-bars, high bar, they're the events that we could really upset the current team members and maybe get a chance and an opportunity to break into that team. Because when you're a junior gymnast, set Harry Hepworth apart because he's almost an anomaly. He's completely genetically built for those apparatus and is incredibly gifted, and also at the same time works incredibly hard. I certainly don't want to discredit his work ethic, but typically as a junior gymnast it takes a while to build that strength and that power and that experience that you need on those events. Particularly with that strength, you've got to wait until your body's fully developed and grown. So pommel horse, parallel bars and high bar, the very technical apparatus, and floor to an extent, is where you can really get ahead quite quick as a junior gymnast. And then as you grow into your early 20s, mid 20s, you develop that strength and that power. So that's that's the area I would be focusing on if I was those gymnasts that were 16, 17, 18. I think that is the key in terms of getting into the team, because it's also where we're probably a little bit weak at the moment as a team. So yeah, very impressed with Great Britain. It was, we had Jonas competing there. I think he fills some of those holes, definitely. Parallel bars and high bar, great parallel bar worker, great high bar worker. We didn't see much of him, so anybody that was watching the action, we weren't able to watch the team qualification day. So it's a bit sad that there is just one day of qualification, which is also the team competition, and we weren't able to see that on a broadcast. I saw quite a few comments around being disappointed that we weren't able to see that, and me too. The team event for me is the most exciting event. I guess they tried to add in the mixed team event. That gained priority, and when they're looking at that week and how they format that week and schedule it for the gymnasts, it's such a long program now. They've added a completely new event in. I see what they're doing. Whether that's going to completely work or not, I don't know. I'm hoping that at World Championships, Olympic Games, we'd get that team final still and the mixed team. Because it's the most exciting competition to watch for me. We'll see how the mixed team plays out, but I like watching the very best athletes and the very best teams and all of those members of that team compete against each other, because you get to see quite a lot of unique gymnastics. Those gymnasts that you maybe wouldn't see in an all-around final or apparatus final, but they're like third or fourth or fifth member of the team on that apparatus, you get to see them in that team final, and I really like that. I like the variety of seeing all the team members, and I think you get a much better understanding of like the cross-section of how good a team is by seeing all of their members of that team compete on an apparatus. So yeah, Great Britain, I think, it was exciting to see Jonas compete there. Fresh, new, young talent. I think a big future for him. Really excited to see what he does for the rest of this year and leading into next year. And it's a strong team. And actually, I watched that British, and I felt that the top six guys kind of had set themselves apart from the next six guys. But what I've seen from this past weekend in the British Team Championships and being able to watch those routines on the BG Score app is that actually those bottom six guys, they're doing everything they can to try and catch those guys up, because they're being pushed by the junior gymnasts underneath them, which is really, really interesting. And that was probably one of my biggest takeaways from the European Championships, was that I felt the experienced senior gymnasts that had been used to competing on 10 skills have adapted to this new code of 8 skills and the difficulty really well. Like, it's been a pretty smooth transition for all of those guys, because they have that bigger repertoire of gymnastics that they've maybe trained for 20 years and they've learned so many skills and been through 3 or 4 cycles that they can adapt fast. And those junior gymnasts that have just moved up to senior gymnastics, they don't have to worry about adding in 2 extra skills on each apparatus. They just make the skills that they have in their routine even more difficult. And I think it was really reflective of the competition results that you had senior experienced gymnasts and junior gymnasts coming through doing very, very well and squeeze in the middle in a sandwich type situation. That was really, really interesting for me. You take that all around final and you're seeing gymnasts like Kashmir Smith, Joel Plata from Spain doing very, very well, and they are into their mid-late 20s, approaching their 30s, and they're getting some of their best all-around results that they've ever had. So yeah, for the team, the British team, super strong, but definitely will be working on pommel horse, parallel bars and high bar as we go into the rest of this year and next year, and I'm sure the coaching staff, that will be a key area of focus. And I think those junior gymnasts stepping up, that's where they could probably fill some of those gaps. And I think ultimately, if we were to compete in a major championship against the American team, the Japanese and the Chinese, it's that one kind of weak score on those 3 apparatus that would probably we'd be struggling to keep up with them in terms of the difficulty, I think. On the other 3 apparatus, I think we can compete with any of the teams in the world. And that was quite evident in the team scores. The team that finished second, Switzerland, I think a very young team. And it's almost the opposite to our team. So very good on pommel horse, very good on parallel bars, very good on high bar. And they beat the British team on all 3 of those apparatus, but then lost considerably on floor, rings and vault. So with that being a very young team, I think exactly what I've just said in terms of that experience and the time to develop that strength and that power. It's taken a bit of time. I think they'll get there over the next 3 years. And the fact that they have that technical side already, I would argue that it's easier to build the strength and the power and the difficulty. It's easier to do that than it is necessarily to build that great technical base on those other apparatus. So that was really interesting, really exciting young team. And they weren't far off GB. 2 marks is nothing. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they perform for the rest of this cycle. Italy were third, and I think Italy looked a bit tired, a bit weathered. I think Kensley brought this up on our podcast. She wasn't sure how they'd perform. They just had the Serie A, which is the Italian league season. I think that team's looking a little older now. They have the young gymnast in Targetta that won the medal on Pommel horse, which is really exciting gymnast to watch, but maybe a little bit just tired and weathered, I think, the Italian team in comparison to the Swiss team looking pretty fresh. The British team revamped with a few new additions. I'm going to keep a close eye on them, see how they do over the next couple of years, the Italian team. I think after that, Germany impressed me quite a lot. I think Germany topped the medal table for men and women, which is exciting. Some good young talent, particularly the young gymnast that was part of the mixed team, Timo Eder, who did the high bar routine to clinch the gold in the mixed team final. So Germany, quite exciting. They obviously had the experience there of Andy Tober, who had a great competition. And I was so happy. As a former teammate of his, I remember competing against Andy when I was like 15, and I think he was maybe 16, in the four-way matches and then the Junior European Championships. We finished like neck and neck in the 2008 Junior European Championships. So that's how long he's been competing at this highest level, which is incredible. And he's a little bit older than me, like I said. He's got a lot of gymnastics pedigree. His dad was a very, very good gymnast that represented Romania, and then they moved over to Germany. So, I'm looking forward to hopefully having a conversation with Andy. Now he's announced his retirement, and what an incredible way for him to finish on the high bar in the high bar final. And I've messaged him a few times in the last couple of years and said, Andy, you're maturing like a fine wine. Like, his gymnastics getting better and better. And to be able to see that someone's technique and the way they perform skills to improve over time is such a cool thing. It shows you that, age really is just a mental barrier that you put on yourself. There are those physical obstacles you have to get over, but if you train right, you prepare yourself well, you recover properly, you have a good team around you. If you're able to stop yourself from overtraining and those overuse injuries, and you navigate it well, you can really have a successful career. And high bar is not an event that's easy to do. So to be doing high bar in your mid-30s, competing on the world stage, and to be making finals and winning medals, like, what an incredible achievement. So super, super happy for him. It put a big smile on my face. One of my moments of the weekend watching Andy do his high bar routine. And so Germany, impressed me, and I think they'll continue to do that. And France, I mean, the young gymnasts France have got, very, very exciting. They had the Junior European All-Around Champion last year. They have Leo Saladino, who's the French champion. Both did very, very well at this championship. So, we've not seen France perform super well as a team, or I've not been this excited about gymnastics coming out of France for a very, very long time. So that's cool. And so I think the European Championships is going to be really competitive over this Olympic cycle. And if Russia come back into the fold, Ukraine have a bit of a rebuild. I mean, team finals, it could be so, so exciting as we go into LA. So really, really cool. I think we move on to the mixed team. Mixed team event, it's the new event. So it's essentially the same format as the Swiss Cup, and I competed in the Swiss Cup in 2012. So it's a male gymnast and a female gymnast, and what they did was they took the floor, the vault, and the beam for the women, and they took the floor, parallel bars, and high bar for the men. And in the qualification day, whichever gymnast out of the women's team and the men's team for your country that performed best on those three apparatus, when you add the scores together, they qualified for the mixed team. So you can't nominate someone. It's just the gymnast that gets the highest score over the floor, the parallel bars, and the high bar for the men, and the floor, vault, and beam for the women. And so Jake Jarman and Ruby Evans got that spot for Great Britain. That meant that Jake was going to have to perform the day after the qualification event in the mixed team. And quite comically, he tweeted does anybody know the rules of this competition or what's going on? Which is quite funny and explains a lot, right? It was very complicated. They had so many teams in that first round. So what happens is you select the apparatus you want to compete on, and you add your score to the women's score on the apparatus that they've selected, the female gymnast that you're competing with as a team. You add those two scores together, and then the top scores go through to the second round, then you pick another apparatus, and then you go through to the last round. So it all becomes about strategy and tactics. You want to make sure that you get a good enough score to get out of that first round, because I believe that there were 16 or 18 teams in that first round, which is a lot of teams. So that's a lot of performances that the viewers have got to watch, and I think it probably was quite a slow event to compete in because of that. I wondered whether they could reduce that first round of teams to maybe 12 and then 8 and then 4 in the final. And so once you've qualified through to that next round, you pick your next event. So people are trying to weigh up. The most important thing, right, is to get to the final because you want a chance of winning a medal. And really, when you think about it, you want your strongest event last. But maybe if you do your weakest event and you make a mistake, you don't even make it to the next round. So it really was tactics. And I think what happened in the end was the way they've structured the final is that those 4 teams, so those 4 countries that are in the final, there's 2 separate competitions going on. There's the top 2 teams that are fighting for the gold medal, and then the 3rd and 4th place fighting for the bronze medal. Now, we had a little conversation in the studio when we were doing the broadcast. I was having a bit of a back and forth with Beth Tweddle. She was saying, I'd like to see all 4 of them go against each other. So it's just, there's a bit more jeopardy. I think it'd be a bit more exciting. I probably agree with that too. And we were talking about the best way to go about it. I think it is all about getting yourself into that final. And maybe what you do is you go for your second best event first, your weakest event in the middle, and then your best event for the end, or you completely do a reverse order. You go your best first, second best, and then your least favourite event, so you're just in the final. I think the interesting thing, so when I competed in the Swiss Cup, typically the male gymnasts in that competition were very close in terms of their scores, and it actually came down to how strong your female gymnast was. So in that event when I competed, I chose to compete. So the way they did it in the Swiss Cup was you do 4 routines. You did 2 in the first round, 1 in the next round, and then 1 in the final, and you could repeat 1 apparatus. So I picked my best event, which was the high bar, and I also did vault. And when you do the vault, you have to do 2 vaults. Now the men aren't doing the vault now in this new format that was at the European Championships, but the women did. And if the women chose to do vault, they had to do 2. So I did my 2 vaults, I did my bar routine, and the girl at the time, she picked floor. And it was the end of the year, an Olympic year. I think she was using this competition as just an opportunity to do a competition for Great Britain. Maybe struggled in her preparation, and she fell like 3 or 4 times on the floor, and she scored like a 9 or a 10. I can remember at the time being absolutely livid, because if you got through to the next round, you earned a lot more money. And I'd like really prepared for this competition, and I dreamed of doing this competition because being a massive gymnastics fan, some of the legends that had won this competition in the past, I was like, God, it'd be so good to get to the final and compete against some of these great gymnasts. Because there was always a team from Russia, Ukraine, Germany. I think Fabian was competing at the time. There was always a strong Swiss team. They'd send their best team. But a lot of the time it came down to how strong your female gymnast was. Whether that plays out in a similar way, I'm not sure. I'm not sure why they didn't choose to put A bars in there. I think to do beam, vault and floor, they're all 3. They're leg events. And it would be nice to see the diversity of putting bars in. I think the vault, there were not many all-around gymnasts in women's vault that are able to perform 2 high-level vaults. So, I think for me, if they could find a way of doing bars and adding that in, I've heard that they weren't able to do that because they didn't have the right fixings to fit all the men's events and the women's events in there. But I definitely think that this was like, let's try it out, see how it works. And I think it was a great opportunity for other countries to watch and see how the other teams played the strategy, because that event is going to be in LA 2028. I think the great part of it is that it's new, it's different, it's a bit exciting, and hopefully it's going to bring a female gymnastics audience into men's gymnastics and vice versa. And in that situation, look, there are way more female gymnastics fans than men's gymnastics fans, so men are definitely riding the coattails of the women's side of the sport there, and we're hoping it brings a lot of fans in and introduces women's artistic gymnastics fans to men's gymnastics. And hopefully there's some people that see they're introduced to men's gymnastics and they maybe stay and become fans. I'm certainly hoping that happens. So I think it's great for that. It offers the countries another opportunity to win a medal. There've only ever been 8 medals on offer in men's gymnastics and 6 medals on offer in women's. So really, you're fighting for 14 gold medals, where in a sport like swimming and athletics, there are so many medals to win. So to add one more in there and have 15 medals up for grab is really exciting. And I know that most sports, their funding is determined by how many medals they can win. So for gymnastics, that's great. That's brilliant. And I think a lot of teams will be targeting that as a medal for LA 2028. So a lot of people kind of seeing how to play it and looking at the strategy and what happened in the final, because there were 2 different medal matches and the strategy that teams had gone for. The Germany and Great Britain had picked their best apparatus in the earlier rounds and then ended up in the final with their weaker apparatus. And then Italy and I believe it was France were competing for 3rd and 4th place. But what they did was they used their weaker events and managed to get to the final and had their stronger events. So you ended up in a situation where the team that won the gold medal, that was Germany, and Timo Eder did a great high bar routine with a Luke in. It was super exciting. And Jake also did a great high bar routine. And what was great about that was that Jake had told us at the British Championships when we interviewed him that he wasn't planning to do high bar really in the near future. So amazing that he turned that around in just a couple of months to then perform at European Championships. But what happened was you had the 2 top teams scoring lower than the 3rd and 4th team, but the 3rd and 4th team were only fighting for their bronze medal. So it looked a bit odd, and for the viewer, I'm sure it was quite confusing. So maybe Beth is right. Maybe when you get to that final round, it's all 4 teams going head to head. And I asked the question around whether you got to choose whether the girl went first or the boy went first. And one thing that might be cool is to see the female gymnast and the male gymnast and the female coach and the male coach actually coming together a little bit. And it might encourage more collaboration between the 2 sports to really think about tactics. Okay, do we put the male gymnast up or the female gymnast? And what routine are you going to do and what routine are you going to do? And I like that. I think it brings everybody closer and maybe encourages a bit more collaboration, even in the training gym. Oh, okay, once you've opened that line of communication, maybe we can help you with technique on vault here, and maybe you can help us with the artistry side on floor, and that will be interesting to see how that develops. I think you're going to have the 2 programs work together when in the past they've been very much separate and isolated. So that's cool. I like that. I think that's really cool. It's a different dynamic. And then when we move to the all-around final, I think the all-around final, Adam Azil he was quite far ahead. I think he was chased. He was chased by the young French gymnasts and he was chased by the Hungarian gymnast, who I'm really, really impressed with. I've enjoyed watching his gymnastics over the last few years. So to see him on the podium, I think that was brilliant. Typically in the past, he's shown brilliant work on floor. He has an amazing floor routine. Very, very good performer. I like his style. Reminds me of classic Hungarian gymnasts of the past. And he has that difficulty and he has that kind of Eastern European technique and style to his gymnastics. And I think Hungary are a team that are going to continue to do really, really well in this cycle. And we'll see some great gymnastics from them. The 2 young French gymnasts, so the junior European champion Mansard and then Leo Saladino, really, really impressed me. I mean, yeah, Mansard, the young gymnast that was the junior European champion last year, he's got a bright future ahead of him. Almost reminds me a little bit of like almost a mix between a kind of Russian style and a Japanese style, obviously with some French gymnastics technique in there. I'm very, very excited about him. And I think what you saw in that all-around final was exactly what I said. And it was what I thought this code was going to do to the sport on the men's side. I really think now you're going to see, and this was evident in the Pommel horse final, for the first time in, I don't know, I don't even know the statistic or even if this has ever happened before, but the 3 medalists on Pommel horse were teenagers. That right there is evidence that this code is massively benefiting the junior gymnasts coming up. And we've seen that in women's gymnastics, right? We've seen that before. Those typically you'll have 15, 16-year-olds winning global medals on the Olympic stage. What I wouldn't want to happen is that all of a sudden you have these juniors now that are pushing extreme difficulty to make it onto the team at 17, 18, and to get that difficulty, they've had to push so hard that they're burning out really fast. If that does end up happening, yeah, that's going to be almost like very counterintuitive to the one of the reasons that was given for dropping the skills to the code of points to 8 skills instead of 10 is that we want the older gymnasts to be able to compete for longer. But what might happen, an unintended consequence of that might be that these juniors at 15, 16, 17 push so hard the difficulty to get into an Olympic team at 17, 18 that this end starts burning out. So we'll see how that plays out. Hopefully that doesn't happen, and with the introduction of sports science within all of the top countries now, and just a better knowledge and understanding of how to recover, prepare the body, the mental health of the athletes, working on the mindset, the longevity of careers, that there's enough knowledge within the sport and professionalism to avoid that. But that is something that I could potentially see as an unintended consequence, as I explained. It is exciting, though, to see those juniors just competing with the big guns and almost fearless competitors. Really cool. And I think what that is going to do, that sandwich of gymnasts in the middle that have kind of stuck between a few generations, never really trained on 10 skills, have always been on 8, but struggled to make that jump when they first became seniors to 10 skills. I think that younger group underneath them is going to push them hard. And so you might end up with just the level might just go through the roof, and it's kind of what I'm expecting, which is going to be great for people that are gymnastics fans to watch, and the type of skills that we're going to see is going to be really, really cool. In terms of that 8 skills and how it's affected all the apparatus, I think it was very noticeable, and the commentary team brought this up on the BBC, and I didn't really notice at first, but the parallel bars routines look really short now that 2 skills have been taken out of it, really fast. I think on high bar, you certainly lose a lot of those in-bar elements that are almost filler skills. They're kind of gone, so it's increased the difficulty. I do wonder whether we're going to end up with, they've tried to promote releasing catches like deaths and pagans. They're a bit exciting, Jaeger full turns. But I do wonder whether we're just going to end up with most of the routines being 2 Kovachs, 2 Kachevs, and people trying to do a big dismount, so triple backs. Be interested to see how that plays out. And maybe you'll end up with a lot of people doing Stauder or close bar Kachevs and then 2 other Kachevs. And yeah, I think they might end up having to change the rule there. So just any Kachev is in the same box. Because that seems like that's a way that all of those Kachev guys are going to go. They'll specialise in doing Stauder Kachevs and maybe Stauder Lukins, which would be cool. I think rings, what's interesting about rings is there's not a lot of skills to build up that difficulty. I think one thing I did notice is that the all-arounders and the guys that aren't as strong, it's very hard for them to get a high start value on rings now. If you're not strong, there's been a decrease in the value of some of the swinging elements. So they're really relying on a big dismount. And so rings is very, very tight when it comes to the strength. And it seems to still come down to the dismount. And none of the top guys at the Europeans in the rings final were able to stick their dismount. So they were all going, I think, for that stick bonus. And they're all kind of taking the hit on maybe taking a step or not having done enough numbers to be able to stick it, but they're getting the difficulty in now, and hopefully as they progress and do more routines over the rest of the year, they'll be in a position for the World Championships to be able to stick those big dismounts. But I enjoy watching those big dismounts. It's really cool. I think Adam Azil already had a double-double straight, so for him, he hasn't had to change anything. So at the minute, yeah, it's quite comfortable for him to do that dismount and gives him a real advantage when it comes to rings. It was great to see Patronus, obviously, in the rings final again, going for his 8th title. I think on Pommel horse, it's made the routines quite exciting. I'm enjoying it. I like the variety. We're starting to see almost the maximization, which isn't a word, but the maximization of those skills where the guys are doing like Sones and Bezegos on one arm, now into dismounts and Russians and flops. And I think we're seeing quite a lot of variety, more travels again. There's going to be a huge emphasis on execution now that everything's a bit tighter. So, Rhys McClenaghan's almost set the standard now for European gymnastics. We've seen that from the Chinese, but now I think you're starting to see everybody start to stretch their circles out, and that's just going to become the standard, that you have to have a stretched circle to be one of the top guys on pommel horse. And on floor, I think we're seeing huge difficulty. I do wonder whether we're going to end up seeing, again, it seems to happen every cycle, we just end up seeing the same routines. Still, I think for everybody, everyone keeps talking about the single leg balance. It just looks it stands out so much in those routines. It just looks out of place. I really do hope they revise that. And I want to see. Hopefully, we start seeing a few more triple backs again. Luke's doing it. I would have thought we'd see more. Maybe since the Paris Olympics, people haven't had enough time to prepare that skill because it's such a big skill and needs a lot of preparation, both physically and mentally. I want to see more of those triple backs. We're seeing the guys doing their combinations right towards the end. So I think a lot of those gymnasts that are doing a straight front out of their combination, the big area for them to improve their difficulty is to add a double front there. So I think what we'll end up seeing is double twist to double pike and 2.5 to double tuck. We'll probably see that from the top gymnasts on floor. But yeah, and then vault is vault. Similar, not much has changed on vault. I think we'll just see more gymnasts pushing difficulty. One thing that I did see over the past weekend, which was really exciting from a junior gymnast, was Sol Scott did a Yurchenko triple twist. Maybe the best Yurchenko triple twist I've ever seen. So that's cool. That's exciting. That's a different vault that you don't see very often. And with him being such a tall gymnast, it really stands out. Something very, very different and unique, and he's incredibly stylish. So that's how it's kind of impacted those Apparatus. And then we go into the Apparatus finals. I think expectations going in, the big story on floor was Luke. Could he do it? Could he win 3 back-to-back? I was a little bit surprised with Artem Dolgy-Piat from Israel. I thought he might put up a bigger fight. I think what happened in the end was that Harry and Luke had such a big difficulty advantage that he had to be perfect. And I think he was trying to be perfect. And as soon as he took a big step, that was it. It was kind of gone then. And maybe that is a bit of a changing of the guard. He's been competing for a long time, Artem. I think he's struggling almost to keep up now with that difficulty of those British guys. And because there's 2 of them, it kind of seems like a bit relentless. And there's not only 2, there's 3. So Jake would have qualified for the floor final as well, but you got 2 per country on floor. That's how good we are on floor. And so, yeah, when we went into that final, it was all about whether Luke could do it, right? And to do it 3 times in a row. And one thing I would say is that you have to remember that in qualification, you don't just have to beat 7 other guys. You've got to beat everyone. It's so much harder to qualify for the final. You're competing against 50, 60 gymnasts to get into that final. So to have just got into the final and give him the chance to do it 3 times in a row, that expectation on himself would have been so high, and the pressure and the nerves. So credit just for getting into that final. Massive well done to Harry for making another final on floor. And then as I watched the 2 routines, I think the first half of the routine for Luke, I was like, no, he's not going to do this now. There's been too many steps. And in that second half, something just switched. And I think in the first half, I took 14 tenths when I was kind of watching it and judging it. And in the second half, I took maybe 4 tenths. And I think what played out in that floor final, when I then watched back Harry's routine, because I think they were very close, I took very similar deductions, but it was actually that bonus of sticking the dismount, which is a new rule that came into play, that I think was the determining factor. And it was very evident over the course of that weekend watching those routines that sticking bonus is big. That can really change things. So for Luke, to have gone and stuck that double-double, I think that was the deciding thing. I think overall the routine was way cleaner from Harry, but I think with that sticking bonus, the fact that he was the reigning back-to-back European champion, to go and do it for a 3rd time, an incredible achievement. I don't think anybody will do that again anytime soon. There's only one other gymnast that's ever done that on floor. It was an Italian gymnast back in the 1960s. I think floor is one of the hardest apparatus to go back-to-back on. There's so much room for error. You can essentially take a big step on every single tumble that you do, and Luke does as many tumbles as it's possible to fit in the time frame that you're given. Incredibly impressed with that. The first gymnast ever to win 3 individual gold medals at European Championships. I had wondered whether Max, Lewis or Dan Keatons had done that. Only ever won 2. So to have gone 3 times back to back, nobody's done that before. Incredible achievement, and I don't think that'll be beaten anytime soon. So well done, Luke Whitehouse. What an incredible performance. And just, he's so young still. Early 20s, he's still at university. But when he does come towards the end of his career and he looks back, that is an unbelievable achievement. So absolute credit to Luke. Same for Harry. The second time on the second day of Apparatus finals, when we rewatched that final, I kind of thought, maybe I need to rewatch those routines because Harry's looked so clean. I think it just came down to that dismount, the last thing the judge sees, and it was low chest, probably a 3 tenths 2. But very, very tight. It could have gone either way, and ultimately it came down to that bonus for me. It was that bonus 1/10. And a lot of the time, it's not even that the gymnasts are scoring different, it's just the average over all of those judges. So the average is taken from those 6 judges that sit on that panel in terms of execution. So when you see scores on the TV that are 14.366, 14.333, 14.999. They've not scored 14.9. It's the average that's giving you that score. So sometimes they are getting the same score. It's just one judge has seen it slightly differently. When it comes to the pommel horse, it was going to be a new champion. Reece wasn't there to defend. He had made an attempt, I think, but struggled getting back. He'd obviously been on a dancing show, had a little injury. I think he's probably disappointed. I watched his vlog this morning. On the broadcast, I said he's going to be super motivated by these new guys coming through. I think Reece needs that kind of motivation, and he said just that. In true champion fashion, he said, I would have backed myself to take the gold medal if I was there competing, but I think that's going to really motivate him. Having this new fresh blood coming through, it's like a new chapter. You know, he's got new rivalries to look forward to, and those guys are going to be around for a long time, teenagers, and they were just incredible. The 2 Armenian gymnasts, just out of this world. I mean, clear and evident for anybody to see that's watching on TV. You don't need to be a gymnastics expert to notice that that's something special. And I think that those 2 guys, and particularly the Armenian gymnasts, they're going to be a real problem if they start competing in the all-around. Because they have the right mixed, you know, we spoke about them being right there on the edge of Europe and Asia, and they have the mix of those 2 genetics. They have the power and the strength and the size of the Europeans, and then the light bones of the Asian genetics that you typically get from the Chinese and Japanese gymnasts. You mix that together and wow, that's a lethal combination. And they have that long history of Albert Azarian being from Armenia, and Davchan's been competing for a long time. So they've got gymnasts now that are doing incredible things on vault, rings and pommel horse. That's 3 apparatus. They've just got to figure out floor, parallel bars and high bar, and all of a sudden they're a team that are challenging. And yeah, they dominate when it comes to mixed martial arts and sports like Sambo, Russian wrestling, Jiu-Jitsu, UFC. They're some of the best in the world. I think they're going to be a real force to be reckoned with over this Olympic cycle, especially if those young guys start competing on 6 apparatus, and a team that could challenge in European championships as we move forwards. So their gymnastics, just the technique, the level, just unbelievable. Very excited to watch them develop. And the Italian gymnast, again, beautiful long lines, amazing circle shape, only 19 I think, so he's just only going to get better and better. So yeah, it's going to be exciting for Reece. And at the moment, I think pommel horse is one of the most competitive apparatus in the world. And we saw that on the back of Paris 2024 with Steven Nedorosik. He's now back training. Pommel horse got a big moment and became almost like the gymnastics event in terms of men's gymnastics of the Paris Olympic Games. So that will be really big going into LA 2028. If Steven's there and Reece is coming in as defending champion, you've got these Armenian gymnasts, and it's just one of the most competitive apparatuses in the world. It's going to be make for a really exciting Olympic Games in 4 years' time and build up to it. When it comes to rings, it was all about Petronas. Could he win 8 titles? His strength was just absolutely incredible, rock solid. He tried a double straight. I performed it really well, just took a big step. Courtney did the triple back. I think it's really hard for me to separate my heart and my head when I watch Courtney perform. I feel like the judges were a little bit harsh on his routine. I think the only thing that I would say is that maybe he had quite a big swing throughout his routine in the strength elements, and whether they take a global deduction for that or a deduction on each element where he's swinging, I'm actually not sure. I've been asked to do the national judging course for this Olympic cycle, but I'm at a wedding, so I can't do it. I would like to do the next course if I could. Just gives me a better understanding of how the judges view the gymnastics. And I think that will actually help me if I'm doing more broadcasting or maybe commentary in the future, understanding what the judges are looking for and what they're seeing in this Olympic cycle and how they're applying a code of points to the gymnastics that they watch. So I am going to try and do that because I think that will be really beneficial and also helpful for the podcast too when I'm talking about gymnastics. But I think rings, came down to that. Shared podium with Adam Azil. I really brushed over Adam Azil in the all-around, but, it was very, very hard to beat him. He's so good on rings and so good on vault and so far ahead of everybody else in that all-around final that he only really needs to be solid on the other 4 apparatus, and nobody can really challenge him at the moment. I think that will change moving forward. particularly when Jake Jarman's back doing all 6 events, and we have those French gymnasts start to improve, and maybe other all-arounders come into the fray. And yeah, I think that will change. But at the minute, he's far and away the top all-arounder, I think, in Europe, and I'd expect him to be right up there at the Worlds as well. And so on rings, he does such a beautiful routine. Someone pointed something out to me. It was one of the commentators had said that a few years ago when he was doing his landing skill, which is when you see the rings. So when you watch the rings event, for people that are back home and they watch rings on TV, you'll see the coaches lift the guys up and they'll shift all their body weight over and really wrap their hands around the rings. That's because when you do that first strength skill, you want as much grip on the rings as possible. So you want the guard, which is the handguard and the piece of leather, to be really tight. That's how you get a really good grip. And quite often now the gymnasts do a landing skill where they hang in straight arms and they pull all the way up. And someone was telling me that for a long time, Adam Azil and his coach, when he would hang like that and his coach would let him go, like bring him down and stop him, his coach would give him a little lift when he walked away. I never spotted that. And the commentator had spotted that and pointed it out to the head judge in the UK, and they didn't do anything about it. And apparently that is a deduction. It's a 0.3 deduction, and that potentially cost Courtney a medal in the past. And I was like, whoa, I'm going to go out and search for that routine and see if I can see it, where he lifts him up and it's like a little, but also at the same time, you can't blame the Turkish gymnast and his coach. That's smart. That's so clever. Like that never even crossed my mind, and I wish I'd have known that, because for a while I was performing that skill and I struggled with it so much. It'd been great if Sergey gave me a cheeky little nudge upwards, but I'm going to go out and find that routine, and maybe we can do that after this podcast. But yeah, Adam Azil and Petronas to share that podium, and Petronas to win 8 rings titles. No one's ever going to beat that. I don't think anybody will ever beat that. What a legend that guy is. Such a nice guy, an absolute professional. And to be doing this way into his 30s, I think he's 34, so he's 2 years older than me, on rings. It's interesting, the female commentator asked me a question. She said, when's your peak strength? And I listen to a lot of people talk about mixed martial arts and fighting, which is kind of like the pinnacle of human strength, right? And aggression and physicality. And they typically say around 32, 33 is your prime as a guy. But we always say that your prime in gymnastics is 23, kind of mid-20s. And that's kind of the old way of thinking. I think that's typically for an all-arounder. And I think that's because in the past, pinnacle was the all-arounder and we didn't really have specialists. But it was a really interesting question. I was like, I don't actually know, but I think strength on rings is something you can continue to develop as you get older. So it will be really interesting to see, we had a podium of teenagers on pommel horse. Could we have a podium of 30 plus aged gymnasts at the Olympic Games in 4 years' time? I don't see Petronas finishing. I don't see Courtney finishing. Adam Azil. So yeah, that's going to be really interesting. And maybe how on some apparatus you see teenagers winning the medals, some apparatus you see 30-year-olds winning the medals, and which apparatus lean more towards the experience and the mindset and the decision making, and which ones more towards youth and freshness, your ability to do reps and reps and reps. So yeah, really interesting concept in that question that she asked me. I'd be interested to know, anybody at home, what your thoughts are on that. As a gymnast, specifically competing in gymnastics, maybe as a ring specialist, and we might have Courtney listen to this, or maybe another ring specialist. What do you think? She stumped me a bit with that question. I was like, I actually don't know. I know for me that I was strongest when I was probably in my early 20s, but I think my shoulder injuries held me back from progressing and continuing to develop that strength. And maybe if I didn't have them, I'd have been able to do that. A lot more guys on rings now are training in a weights gym and lifting weights, which wasn't something that I think typically we'd do in the past. That's more, I think, the kind of Russian style training. They would do that. I think when I went to the Russian National Center back in 2009, in the gymnastics facility, they had a weights gym. And you could see the gymnastics gym through the weights gym. And I always felt that was a real benefit for those junior guys, because if the weights are there, even if they're just visible and you're around them, you're more likely to go over and be a bit inquisitive and see the older gymnasts go, maybe I'll try and lift a few weights. Whereas if it was separate in another completely different gym, maybe you wouldn't have that access to it, so you wouldn't start lifting weights and stuff, and maybe the coaches then wouldn't develop their knowledge because it's very separate to the gym. So we'll see a lot more gymnastics clubs now that do have weights in the gym, so the gymnast can do it right there. And I think that's probably helping with people continuing to develop strength over a long period of time. When it comes to the vault final, and just to point out, Harry, I think, did a brilliant routine. Just again, came down to the dismount. But yeah, I think he's going to be there. Definitely, he's going to be there moving forwards and have that triple back in his routine, and that difficulty will play a big factor, and he'll get that very consistent. It's really nice and tight and tucked when he does it. Just going to take a bit of time. That it hasn't been long that he's been practicing that triple back. I think he started really seriously trying to do it after the British Championships, where Courtney managed to beat him in the rings final with that difficulty. And then it comes to vault, and we just see Jake almost replicate his world's vault that he did a few years ago when he became world champion, and again shock himself. You see his facial expressions, just the most incredible piece of gymnastics. To be able to perform a vault that difficult so consistently and to have stuck it dead. I talk about when you see gymnasts on the TV stick a vault like that, you'd expect to maybe watching from your sofa that the gymnasts do that. They don't do that all the time. It's very few and far between that they'd stick a vault like that, even in training. You might do it a handful of times in your whole career. I think he said that's only the second time he's done that. So I was off my feet, jumping up and down. And then unfortunately, his Dragulescu was just it's almost too easy for him now. He had too much juice in the tank. Exactly the same thing with Harry Hepworth when he did his Dragulescu. And I know that they're both working on upgrading that vault, and Harry's, looking at upgrading 2 vaults. Jake's going to potentially be working on the Pike Dragulescu, and the same as Harry, and it looks like they're both ready to upgrade that vault. So whether they do double Pike first and then add the half twist, I don't know. But I think, the end goal is for in LA to have 2 5-6 vaults to give them the best chance of winning those medals. And Harry will be trying to improve his bronze medal, and Jake will be trying to replicate his world gold medal. And that's just going to be a really exciting inter-team rivalry that we get to watch over the next 4 years, and it's just amazing for the British team. And then you have Davtyan, so experienced. He's been sticking those vaults throughout the whole of the year so far and winning gold medals everywhere. And I was told in Cottbus that he stuck all 4 vaults. So in qualifying, he stuck the first 2, and then final stuck them again. And it was the first time that I think, directly by the numbers, the stick bonus actually came into play and gave him the gold medal, whereas if it was last year, Jake would have won the gold. But because they got the 0.1 extra, that became the determining factor and gave Davtyan the gold. And then Nazir picked up the bronze from Ukraine, so it was good for Ukraine. I was very impressed with him. Massively improved his all-around. Remind me a little bit of Oleg's gymnastics, similar build. I think he'll be somebody to watch over the next 4 years. Probably will be their top all-arounder, and hopefully he stays there and is able to find a way to stay in Ukraine and compete and represent Ukraine. But yeah, Davtyan just knocks those vaults out the park. It's ridiculous. After he sticks that first one, you're just expecting him to stick the second one. And Beth Tweddle actually brought up a good point. She was like, it wasn't too long ago that if the guys landed those big vaults, that they would probably win a medal. Now they're having to stick them to win a medal. And, the vault isn't getting any bouncier. And the springboard isn't getting any bouncier, but the guys still find a way to cram in more difficulty. So, yeah, I can't imagine what kind of gymnastics we're going to see on vault at the LA Olympics in 4 years' time, but super exciting event for everybody to watch. And I personally really like the sticking bonus. It adds just another element to it. And Beth, who was with me in the commentary box, she said, look, the goal is to stick anyway. Why do they need to add a bonus? And I said, Beth, you're probably underestimating how good you were. I think Beth had won 6 European titles. So she was like, I always tried to stick my dismount. I was like, Beth, you were incredible. One of the best bars workers ever. not all gymnasts are able to do that, particularly when they're competing in all round. And to get to the point where you're so well conditioned and you've done your routine so many times that you're actually thinking about sticking the dismount, that takes a long, long time of preparation. It only maybe happens a few times in an Olympic cycle. So I like the addition of the stick bonus. I think it's cool. And I think it's great for the fans, because fans, it's really easy for them to tell the difference between a routine when they see a stick or they see a step. They don't maybe need to understand how difficult the skills are and maybe the way in which they're rated in terms of the points that you get for them, but it's really easy to see, oh, they didn't move their feet or they moved their feet, so that's a better performance. So I think it makes it easier in that respect for the fans to understand. I think there's certainly some areas that is making it incredibly complicated. When I was watching the women's vault, they're getting bonuses for doing certain types of vaults, and I was like, whoa, this makes no sense. It's making it so complicated for the viewer. So I understand what they were trying to do, but they really need to find a way to encourage the women's side of the sport on vault to be doing more difficult vaults. You can't be seeing some of the best gymnasts in Europe doing like full twists on vault. They need to be doing double twists as a minimum and 2.5 twists. That's what you want to see from that standard. So yeah, they need to find a way to do that, I think, and promote those more difficult vaults. And then when it comes to parallel bars, it was one of those events that was pretty wide open. I was really shocked with how low the scores were on P-bars. Don't know what that was. Don't know whether the gymnasts are finding it hard to build the difficulty up and adapting to the new code. I think you've lost quite a lot of difficulty in terms of, you can see the older guys that were successful in years gone by still trying to do the under somersault to 1 bar and a 1 bar Healy. And the 2 guys that tried to do that in the final, who were 2 of the favourites for the medals, so Ferhat Arakan and Oleg Vanayev, both fell on that skill. And I was like, right there, that is a visual representation of the changing and the new generation and a different style of gymnastics coming in, and the old way being somewhat redundant. And that was really interesting to see that. And you saw a lot of the young guys perform really well on the parallel bars. And Niels Dunkel, who did really, really well in that competition as a whole in the Europeans, and Germany did really well in the all-around, took the gold medal. Germany had 2 guys on the podium. So yeah, parallel bars, for me personally, weakest event of all 6. And typically it's the strongest. It's where you have the highest scores. So that was interesting. And I think Courtney's did so well in qualifying and made that final. I think 1, because he stuck his dismount and got a lot of bonus for that, but 2, because he was one of those experienced gymnasts that previously competed catching the somersaults where you catch in upper arms, so long swing double backs, front uprise double backs, double fronts. Courtney had done that years ago, so was able to just adapt to this new code. Now they've been upgraded and they've reduced the deductions for those skills. He was able to adapt pretty quickly. And so I think there's going to be a big push towards those skills over the next 6 months, 12 months. But I do think in the end, you will see a nice variety of skills on parallel bars. And anybody that was specializing in one area, he's going to have to adapt and will struggle. In the last cycle, somebody like Ferhat Arakan would be able to do almost 4 skills from upper arms and just build huge difficulty. You're not able to do that anymore. You can only do 2 skills from one family. So I think he's maybe struggling to adapt. And you're seeing the new generation, the younger guys, adapt a little bit quicker, which was surprising. And then when it comes to high bar, I think for me, I'd always love to see a British gymnast competing in the high bar final, but it was all about Andy Tober. What an incredible career. He's been performing now for so long. Like I said, 2008 at the European Championships. That was his first major championships, Junior European Championships. So to still be competing at the highest level in 2025 is an amazing achievement. I represented TV Wetzgau, which is a German Bundesliga team, and that was in way back in 2013. And I think 2015, 2013, I was part of the team there, competed 3 or 4 times, and we won the league that season, which was really cool, won the Bundesliga, and then competed a couple of times a few years later. It didn't go so well. I was really struggling at the time, a little bit mentally and also physically, off the back of the European Championships that I'd competed at. And it wasn't the best experience at that time. I didn't feel like I did a great job for the team, but I always loved competing with those guys. They were so friendly, amazing guys to be around. And I saw two of the guys. I saw Dominic Pfeiffer and Helge Liebrich were there in the crowd with a big Andy Tober sign, which is really cool. And I'm sure, like, what a way to go out. To win a silver medal at the European Championships on high bar, last event of the Championships in Germany, that is how you end your career. It reminded me of the British Championships routine that I did. And I have to say, for Andy Tober, I mean, what a team player he always was, has been for the German team, has really been that rock and that backbone. And that high bar routine that Andy did was absolutely beautiful. He connected his squat half to his Coleman. I wondered whether he'd do his Casino. He made a great decision, didn't need to. There were so many mistakes in that bar routine. I think he used all the experience that he built up throughout his career. Did a beautiful straight Kachev. And stuck his dismount. And I would say, I'd love to ask Andy if we get to have the conversation. I think that was probably the best performance of his career. So to save your best ever routine for your last routine, just absolutely brilliant. I had a big smile on my face. It was a great way to end the weekend. I was really impressed with the young French gymnast. Did beautiful high releases, a massive Coleman. Some of the older guys fell victim, I think, of the pressured situation. I think they were probably thinking, I could win a medal here, and they fell on their releases and made some big mistakes. Robert Trevorgel, who again was another gymnast that finished behind me at the Junior European Championships in 2010, represents Lithuania, managed to take the gold medal, added that triple back in, does beautiful high releases. It's benefited from the changes of the code, and you're now able to do a bit like parallel bars, where you're able to, the upper arm skills have been upgraded when you're catching upper arms. They've been upgraded and the deductions have been reduced. So there's now a real benefit to doing them again. On high bar, the turns where you do a 1.5 turn maybe from a Stauder or a Rabalco to catching inverts, the deductions have been reduced massively. So there's now a real benefit to doing those skills. And that type of a gymnast like Robert, who used to perform those skills, has added that straight back in and he's benefited from that. A bit like Courtney on parallel bars. And he took the gold medal. So yeah, high bar was one of those events that was quite wide open. We saw Marius Giorgio as well. Do incredibly well to take a medal. I think he took a medal, or it was Mansard, the French gymnast. I can't quite remember, but all four of those guys did beautiful routines, and then the other four guys had mistakes. So it's nice to watch high bar. I love sitting back and watching the high bar, and I actually joked on the programme. Matt was like, Sam, how are you feeling about high bar? And I was like, this is why I'm here, to sit and watch high bar. This is it. It's my favourite event. And it inspired me to get back in the gym. And I've just not been able to get back in the gym. And I know when I miss like 3 or 4 weeks from swinging around the bar, I have to almost start from scratch again. So yeah, June is so busy for me with schoolwork and stuff. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get in, but I will do my best. I'm planning for July to have a month of just getting in the gym maybe every week and doing some bar and trying to catch a Coleman or something and doing a little routine maybe try a new skill, maybe play with a Lukin if my shoulder's okay before the summer. But yeah, loved the European Championships. And then, to finish off, incredibly, the British men, every single one of them that compete at the European Championships, aside from Jamie Lewis, because he doesn't have a team, were back competing at the British teams last weekend. I was amazed. Typically after a major championships like that, you take a break, but those guys competing at the British teams, and I think that says a lot about their aspirations and ambitions. I would say on paper, America and the US team have the advantage at the moment. But the one thing that really stuck out for me from watching the routines on the app was that the junior gymnasts, and some of those junior gymnasts are able to compete in the Adam Shield even if they're still under the age of 18, they are going to be incredibly competitive in this cycle. So Uzair Chowdhury, you've got George Atkins did very, very well at that competition, super consistent. Zakane Fawzi from Notts, who's very exciting, did amazing, has just come back from an injury. And then you've got Sol Scott. Those 4 gymnasts, they're the types of guys that could really come in and fill those gaps that we have at the moment on pommel horse, parallel bars and high bar. And they're great on the other events too. And Sol, like I talked about, did a beautiful triple twist in Yuchenko. Very different gymnast. I can't think of another gymnast that has the same build. Very tall, very slight, super technical, different skills. Does a double front, does the Gaylord. 2 on high bar. Massive futures for those gymnasts. Zakane for sure Zakane and Uzair, as they go into the Junior European Championships next year, they'll be looking to win that gold medal as a team again and also challenge for the all-around title and then make a quick transition, I reckon, into the senior team. And that is going to be really exciting to watch. I think all of a sudden that top 6 that were at the moment at the British Championships just in March looked like they were kind of a real step above the rest. I think all of a sudden that 6 could turn into 10, 12, 15. And we could really challenge America over the next 2 years. I don't know about the junior depth that they have in America. I think it's pretty strong, given how many guys they've got competing at a competitive level in the NCAA. But wow, I mean, I'm excited. And I would love to see Russia come back into the fold so that we can see that, like Japan, China, Great Britain, America, and Russia all going at it. That would be the dream in 4 years' time, to be able to see that. I think it would be just the most outrageous level of gymnastics you've ever seen. But those performances, Leeds took the title. Without doubt, they're the strongest team at the moment. Essex were pretty close, and Essex's team has been bolstered by Josh Nathan, moving from Birmingham to South Essex, which was a bit of a surprise when I saw it. Similar move to Courtney after the last Olympic cycle. So maybe he's going to try and follow in Courtney's footsteps. There's a real change in dynamic in Birmingham because the national coach has become, the head coach at Birmingham, who was Joe Fraser's coach, has now become one of the national coaches. So, we've talked about after the Olympic cycle, there's a bit of moving around. So we're seeing that play out. But the Leeds team, their men's team at the moment, they had 3 of the European team were from Leeds. So 50% of the whole team. And they've got other gymnasts that were just as strong. I think they'll dominate. Certainly be the team to beat for the next few years as we go into LA. The Essex team will get stronger as those junior gymnasts improve and start to do what continue to do well. Alex Nishkavano as well is doing some exciting things and is another really technical gymnast, particularly on high bar, parallel bars, pommel horse. And then the team that finished third was Notts, which was great. When I went on the app, you saw the team standings, and it just said the team score. It didn't say which teams, and I was like, I hope it's Notts that's done it. The Notts team did really well. I'm always going to support those guys. Spoke to Josh. He was really happy with their performances. You had Hamish, Adam Tobin, Luke Marsh, Zakane and Alex Cash. All did very well. Alex did really well on pommel horse. Interestingly, we spoke about the team that competed at the European Championships not necessarily having somebody that was an out-and-out specialist on pommel horse. Well, there were 3 guys that topped the standings on pommel horse at the British team that scored like 14-6, 14-2 and 14. So they are the 3 guys that would be pommel horse specialists. So whether or not they could fit into a dynamic, I think, like I said, they're going to have to be strong all-rounders as well if they're going to take a spot in the team moving forward next year. But the great thing is that we have all of that depth, and I've been told by the British national coach that next year there'll be the opportunity to send a whole team to the Europeans and a completely different team to the Commonwealth Games. So we'll get to see potentially 12 gymnasts, different gymnasts from Great Britain competing on the world stage, and then it will be a real dogfight for those 12 to make the world's team at the end of that year. So next year will be massive. I mean, I'm so excited as a gymnastics fan for the podcast, potentially to be involved with broadcasting. But yeah, things to look out for, I guess, moving forward. Hopefully got some episodes coming up with some German athletes. Definitely Andy Tober, he said yes, coming on a podcast. Like to share his story, particularly now that he's retired. We all remember his ACL injury at the Rio Olympics, and he continued to try and compete for the team. I mean, what a hero. And that's going to be off the back of our documentary we've got with Fabian that's coming out very soon. We're super close. I got to the studio this morning. Sam said I was editing last night, and we're like minutes of a documentary away from it being done. I'm really excited for everybody to see that. We're hopefully going to have Luke come on the show, come into the studio and get him in person. For obvious reasons, he's now a very busy man, and he's still, like I said, he's so young that he's at university still, so he's finishing his exams at the same time. So we'll have Luke come on, and then we'll try and get some exciting episodes on the podcast before the summer, before we kind of have not a break from the podcast, but we have a break from things over the August, and I'll focus a bit more on coaching and stuff. So lots of exciting things to come. And thank you to everybody that's been supporting so far this year. The podcast continues to grow and do well. So make sure that you're following the podcast on Spotify. Make sure you're following it on Apple if you listen on Apple Apple Podcasts, and the same thing on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to YouTube, because we're obviously going to have a documentary come out. You don't want to miss that. It's going to come out within the next week, 2 weeks, 10 days. And yeah, thank you everybody for supporting. Please leave us reviews, comment. I do see them all. Sometimes I can't get back to them. I'm still a one-man band juggling 3 or 4 different things. I'm now representing athletes that are going out to Germany competing in the Bundesliga. So that's been an interesting experience. I'm really enjoying it. And I'm hopefully going to start approaching French teams and Italian teams. So any top gymnasts that are out there internationally, don't have to be from the UK, that are interested in competing in those leagues and building up some experience, don't hesitate to reach out. There might be a way in which that I can help you and support you and help connect you to those teams and the right team to make sure that you're able to compete, get that competition experience, and also support yourself financially. But it's been a great first half of the year. We're 6 months into the year, and I'm really excited for the next 6 months. And thank you to everybody for supporting the podcast, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.